Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay as far as uploading to anyone who does listen. Been a trying few weeks, but now that we're past all that, I've got some more interesting things to read for you. I've already found a few grimoires and other things I want to go into at other points, but today we're going to be reading a little alchemy. Um, I want to experiment with other types of occult lit, not just, your run of the mill, well, not run of the mill, but your grimoires with spells and rituals and such, but just other things. I want to probably read some book on occult philosophy and then maybe start looking into some of the more modern texts, go over some of that. My intention is for this to be something enjoyable to listen to, casual, something warm to partake in. It's in the confines of your abode, whatever shape it may come in. Alchemy itself has reached a lot of mainstream types of pop culture, including film, shows, even Japanese animation. If anybody's familiar with Full Metal Alchemist and things like that. So it's interesting to read some of the more ancient texts that describe the process or things relating to the process and how very, very, very different it is from any pop culture depictions. Um, doesn't quite work as easily as one might assume. And a lot of it is symbolic, a lot of it has more to do with what the elements or what the alchemical processes represent, more than the process itself on a material level. Well, it just depends on what you're reading, but it's always good to keep all that in mind, to think about the metaphysical or less tangible aspects of what it is these alchemists were attempting to produce, attempting to gain from their experiments, from their thoughts, actions, and philosophical endeavors. In any case, today I will be reading a book of alchemy, Book of the Chemical Art, originally written 1518 by Marsilius Ficinus, or Ficinus. And this is the 2016 edited edition by Tarl, Warwick. I'm going to read the About section here. Get a little preview. The Book of the Chemical Art, ascribed to Marsilius Ficinus, provides one of the most in-depth accounts of alchemical philosophy ever created. It is a philosophical treatise, as those of antiquity, listing its way through objections to alchemy, refuting its foes, as well as superstitions prevalent at the time not accepted by the literate mystics of the era. It culminates with a section dedicated specifically to answers on such subjects, supposedly derived from the conversations held between one Iardus, I believe that's how it says, Iardus, a Catalonian necromancer, and the devil himself, which is here considered to give credence to the entire manuscript. So we're going to have a necromancer and the devil conversing on the topic of alchemy and seeing what they come up with. That sounds fun, doesn't it? Oh, and I forgot to mention, I hope everyone's enjoying the upcoming festivities that come with Halloween, Samhain, whatever you want to call it. I hope you're with your families, and I hope you do some spooky stuff. You want to tap into a little bit of that darkness at least once a year. I know it makes me feel warm and cozy when I do. As is with other recordings I've done, this will be my first time reading it, and I will begin with Chapter 1 of the Generation of Metals in the Bowels of the Earth. The opinion and determination of all who believe rightly is the same. that all metals are generated by the vapor of sulfur, an argentum vibe, because when the fat of the earth, being heated, finds the substance of water somewhat congealed, it as well by its natural virtue as by the rays of the celestial bodies and the endeavor of heaven, as according to the purity or impurity of each, consolidated in it in the veins of the earth, into those most beautiful bodies, gold, silver, copper, tin, iron, and lead. Short chapter, straight to the point. Chapter 2 of Nature and Art. But there are in the arc of this world two efficient causes, nature and art. Nature daily produces and generates new things, but art, by conception, making an impression of the similarity of those things upon it herself, does in an admirable manner follow in the footsteps and designs of nature, so that if the wit of man does not sometimes assist in some things, it is evident that nature herself had gone astray from her operation. Or, art sometimes does by the help of nature, correct, supply, and in a manner especially, in this magnificent discourse of mineral things, seems to exceed nature, which has already been long since consecrated to perpetual memory by those ancient philosophers. There are two sorts of philosophers, some only searching into nature by herself, have in the mass of their writing delivered the virtue and power which sublunary things have, as well from the element qualities, as from heaven and the stars, as the physicians are, and some others who have described the natures of animals, trees, herbs, metals, and precious stones. But others truly are more glorious, penetrating most sagaciously and sharply, not only into nature, but finally into the manner itself of nature, and into her more inward recesses, have by a truer title assumed to themselves the nature of philosopher. But because nature produces all metals out of two things, sulfur and mercury, and has left us the superior bodies generated out of them, with the inferior bodies, certain it is that the industrious may make the same out of her three operations, and reduce the inferior bodies to the nature and perfection of the superior bodies. Interesting though so far. Short little chapters, but kind of like that. Lets you stop a little bit, think about some of the words you just read. Of course, the writing is very different. It's been translated into a kind of modern English, but still, you can see how there might have been some difficulties in that transition. Chapter 3 refutes an opinion of some in this art, and the philosophical art is laid down in very few words. And because by most of the studious in philosophy it is granted that metals themselves are generated of sulfur and mercury, some have judged that sulfur and mercury, since they are root and matter of metals, ought to be taken and so long purified, until they were combined together into a metallic body. These truly had they descended deeper into nature's sanctuary, would never have come to such foolish opinions. For though sulfur and mercury were as it were the root of metals before the first coagulation, yet now they are not, since they are brought to another nature, whence it remains that there cannot be made out of them any metallic body, since also the chain is unknown, by which Venus and Mercury copulated together in due proportion. Wherefore they are not to be taken, but rather which is out of them fully purified in the womb of the earth, and that truly the most pure, whose like you will not find in a vegetable nature. It is evident that all little trees, flowers, and small herbs are produced from water, and the union of a subtle earth. And if you do endeavor to produce a tree or an herb, you must not take earth or water, but rather that which from them is a scion or a seed, which being committed to the bosom of the earth, the parent of all things, and cherished with the nutrient of their own nature, and called forth by the darting of the solar light, due in due time to break out into the surface of the earth, into the species of a tree or an herb. In like manner, that divine art teaches how to take the seed out of the most perfect body, which being put into the philosophical earth, prepared by art, and continually purified by a temperate heat into a white or red powder, it is said to have converted the inferior bodies into the nature of the superior. The breaking down, obviously, of specific metals or components in order to separate and have more pure forms of specific contents. Pure for a variety of reasons, some metaphysical, others in value, others in their ability to retain form and shape. It doesn't really go into any specific metals or herbs, but I see what points it's trying to make. So it's just a little talking about the philosophy of the process itself, or some of the steps that need to be taken and their importance when dealing with alchemical experimentation. Chapter 4 speaks of why the philosophers have sought for this art, but found it not, and this question is resolved, why the spirits in metals cannot propagate its like, since the spirit of everything is the author of generation. But we readily affirm that the inspiration of God was the chief cause by those ancient philosophers searched after the science. For the philosophers, seeing that all vegetable and animal things, as also other things do by certain spirit of their own multiply themselves, and that a transmutation is in this inferior world made by the air, which seemed in a long time to corrupt all particular things, that their nature changed itself by the motions of another thing, there arose among them this question, namely, why the spirit in metals could not propagate its like, since out of one scion there grew many, and out of the little grain almost innumerable grains did multiply themselves. It was at length decreed by the divine oracle that the spirit was withheld by a grosser matter, which spirit, if it were separated by a certain sublimation at the fires, and being separated were preserved in its own proper place, it might, as a seminal virtue, without any untruth, generate its like. From hence the philosophers thought to bring the light and lustre of those perfect body, the most perfect body, into the inferior bodies, since they had found that they differed among themselves only according to purification method, either greater or less, and the mercury was the first original of all metals, which mercury extracting the metallic part of gold, they brought gold to the first nature, which reduction indeed, since it is easy and possible. It was by the philosophers concluded that a transmutation in metals is easy and possible. Well, I don't know about easy. Possible, yes, but easy is it's difficult to discern what they mean by easy, I guess, in regards to like someone who is familiar with the process or has done it before or who's well versed in such processes. But anyway. And when these primitive philosophers had reduced gold into the first matter, they made use of the celestial influence, that it might not be made metal again, such as it was before. Afterward, they purified its nature, separating the unclean from the clean. Now, what is clean? I'm wondering if it's similar to the manner in which specific meats or types of meats are considered unclean by specific religious groups or traditions. That symbolic nature of what is clean and unclean, and how similar it is when it comes to alchemy. Which being done, they called that thing the transmuting stone of philosophers. For the making whereof several operations have been invented by several philosophers, that might be completed by art, which was left by nature, since nature herself is always inclined toward her own perfection. Is it inclined toward her own perfection? Does nature fall toward efficiency and beauty? But what is beauty, right? We start talking about eye of the beholder, such. You start talking about what perfection is. So if it's inclined toward perfection, or her own perfection, then it would be impossible for human eyes to know what that is, or human minds to fully understand what that perfection might be, that it is inclining itself toward. Chapter 5 treats of what the Philosopher's Stone is, and discourses first of its first part. And because the philosopher had so obscurely set forth the science and strange involvement of words and shadows of figures, the stone of the philosopher was doubted by very many men. It was asked, of what things it is made. But if you will mind diligently, we divide the stone into two parts. The first part, we say, is terrestrial, soul, wherein the ancient philosophers and the more modern do plainly agree with me in their testimonies in the turbo. I'm unfamiliar with that word. Let's see if I can get a definition really quickly here. I don't know. Give me turbo. Let's see here. A motor vehicle equipped with a turbocharger? No, that's turbo. I guess I can't find any kind of quick definition for the word turbo. Here. Turbo is a word used in Latin and Arabic languages. Its Latin meaning is uproar or crowd. So, do plainly agree with me in their testimonies in the crowd? Without terrestrial soul, the physical work is not perfected. Since they all assert that there is no true tincture without their aqua regia, brass, because that there is the most pure sulphur of the wise, in which sagacious nature contains her seed. And as the sun diffuses and darts down most lively and penetrating rays on this elementary world, so the stone of the philosopher being by a physical operation made out of gold, the sun, as I may say of the sun. So it says made out of gold, the sun, as in, a son and a daughter, as I may say of the sun, the celestial body. It's interesting. Disperses itself into other metals and will forever equalize them to himself in virtue, color, and weight. And because of all metals, we deservedly take gold before all others. For since we would make gold and silver, it is necessary to take the same. Man is generated out of man, a tree from a tree, an herb produces an herb, and a lion, since each thing according to the temper of its nature, which they call the completion, generates and produces its like. Yet the philosophers more truly do not make gold or silver, but nature, cleansed by the skill of the operator. Read that again. Yet the philosophers more truly do not make gold or silver, but nature, cleansed by the skill of the operator. I have to think about that one more. I like that line. I'm going to keep that one. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit into this chapter 6. I will propose you a similitude of gold. The ethereal heaven was shut from all men, so that all men should descend to the infernal seats, and be there perpetually detained. That's unfortunate. But Jesus Christ opened the gate of the ethereal Olympus, and has now unlocked the kingdom of Pluto, that the souls may be taken out, when by the cooperation of the Holy Spirit in the virginal womb, the Virgin Mary did, by ineffable mystery and most profound sacraments, conceive what was the most excellent in the heaven and on the earth, and at length brought forth for us the Saviour of the whole world, who out of a superabundant bounty shall save all who are able to sin, if the sinner turn himself to him. But she remained an untouched and undefiled virgin, whence Mercury is not undeservedly compared to the most glorious saint, the Virgin Mary. For Mercury is a virgin, because it never propagated in the womb of the earth a metallic body, and yet it generates a stone for us by dissolving heaven, that is gold. It opens it, and brings out the soul, which understand you to be the divinity, and carries it some little while its womb, and at length it is in its own time transmits it to a cleansed body, from whence a child, that is the stone, is born to us, by whose blood the inferior body being tinged and brought safe into the golden heaven, and Mercury remains a virgin without stain, such as it was ever before. That is really, really interesting. I like when there's this combination of, you have Olympus, but then you have talkings of Jesus Christ, and then an association to Mary. It starts getting like very, what's the word? Can't remember. The cross of religions and traditions and cultures in order to find a true purpose. I remember now. Theosophical. How it kind of comes in combination like that. But I like that the Virgin Mary is being compared to Mercury, substance or the raw material, as it did not come from the earth's womb, and as Mary herself remained a virgin, though she gave birth to the stone, or Jesus. So, through some process between mercury and gold, a stone can be produced that could save mankind, just as Jesus has cleansed us of sin. I think that's what it's kind of trying to say. Like I said, this is my first time reading it, and this is some pretty heavy stuff. Really heavy stuff. And that's not a that's not a metal joke. But it's heavy stuff that I can't as easily casually comment on, because it would require a substantial amount of thought. I'm gonna have to reread this one on my own at some later time. Let's see here. Chapter 8 determines why the philosophers have hidden this knowledge, where the praise of the art is set down, and he inveighs against Zoilus, Carper as the philosophers. Okay, I'm just looking ahead a little bit. Chapter 8 treats of the first essence of all things, and it is here discussed what nature is, what the soul of middle nature, what the soul of the world, where that very great error is confuted. Of philosophers, asserting the world to be an animal, and it is disputed that there is only a human soul, by a participation of likeness, of which there seems to be a brutal soul, and that the sun is the eye of the world, and that the heart of heaven. Interesting. I actually kind of want to go over that one, but I also want to kind of just continue ahead. There's quite a bit to go through, and obviously we can't read the entire thing. Well, I like how some of these chapter titles go from being an entire paragraph long title to something simple, such as Chapter 9 of Nature. I'll read this. We affirm nature to be a certain power implemented in things, producing like things out of the like. For nature generates, augments, and nourishes all things, wherefore it has in itself the name of all things. An animal from nature, a stone, wood, a tree, and the bodies which you see are now from nature and her maintaining. Nature is in the blood of the elements, and the power of mixing which brings to pass the mixtures of the elements and everything in its sublunary world, and has imprinted on them a form agreeable to their species, by which that thing is distinguishable and separated from each other thing. Nor is nature of any color, yet a partaker and efficient of all colors, also of no weight, nor quality, but finally the fruitful parent of all qualities and things. What is therefore nature? God is nature, and nature is God. understand it thus: out of God there arises something next to him. Nature is therefore a certain invisible fire, by which Zoroaster taught all things, which begotten, to whom Heraclitus the Ephesian seems to give consent. Did not the Spirit of the Lord, which is a fiery love, when it carried on the waters, put into them a certain fiery vigor? Since nothing can be generated without heat, God inspired into created things. When it was said in the generation of the world, increase and be multiplied, a certain germination, that is, a greenness by which all things might multiply themselves. Whence some more profoundly speculative said that all things were green, is called to grow and increase, and that greenness the name nature. But Aristotle said that motion be unknown, nature is unknown, since it is now volatile, and it is continual motion of generation, augmentation, and alteration, which at length in the latter end of the world shall be stable and fixed, because God will then take away from things that virtue and power of generating, and will place it in the most inward treasure of his omnipotence, where it was from eternity. I therefore had a mind to call this virtue of generation, and of the preservation of things, the soul of the world. Not that the world is an animal, as the Platonic accounts and the testimonies of Arabian, Egyptian, and Chaldean astrologers seem to approve, for the philosophers maintain the world to be an animal, and the heavens and the stars to be animals, and the soul's things to be intelligent, participating of the divine mind. Moreover, that a god or certain soul presided over everything, that all things were full of gods, and was the opinion of Democritus and Orpheus, and of many of the Pythagoreans, to whom they ordained divine honors, and to the same they dedicated prayers and sacrifices, and revered them with diverse sorts of worship. Besides, they reduced all such souls into one soul of the world. They likewise referred all their gods unto one Jove. This Aristotle and the Aristotelian Theophrastus, the Avicen, Algocilus, and the Stoics, and all Peripatetics, man, I always had trouble with that one, Peripatetics, do confess, in which their utmost power have endeavored to prove. I do not doubt but that from hence sprung all the error of gentility, from hence the fictions of the poets, the diabolical sacrifices and sacrilegious victims. Hence the Egyptian land did in their chapels worship and adore some certain animals and other prodigious monsters, who will not say therefore that the philosophy of the heavens is vain, which was most miserable ruined by this common error, and by many others, where the philosophers seem to be most like the beehives or children, buying themselves with bottomless vessel to drain a great well. I like that last line. I'm gonna read that again. Which was most miserably ruined by this common error, and by many others, where the philosophers seem to me to be most like the beehives, or children, buying themselves into bottomless vessels to drain a great well. Yet we may think them worthy or forgiveness, since they had not shined to them the true light, Jesus Christ the Savior. Therefore, it behooves the Christian philosopher, whose authority is graver, and judgment more certain, to bring within the verge of the Catholic Church, which things soever seem to make for the obligation of the nature of faith, as being possessed by unjust heirs, after the manner of Virgil, who gathered gold out of the dunghill of Aeneas, also like little bees, which they suck out the sweetest among the flowers of Hymettus and Hybla, for the sake of making honey. Who is there who would not bewail the tears, the untimely death of Picus and Mirandola, whom the fatal sisters have particularly envied to our age, who had he little longer enjoyed life, would have trimmed up this new beauty, the tattered and begging philosophy, blotting out all its errors. Yet let everyone highly praise the lawful philosophy, whose foundation is nature, or the world, and which prescribes manners and virtue to men, which correct for you the first youthful years and rudiments of your life, which challenges to itself the interpretation of nature and the search of things the most abstruse from our eyes, most worthily true, which the scanning of divine and human things should be referred, we thereby as much as we can, by the divine favor, and by natural light, inquiry into the recesses of the world, into the earth, and the tracks of the sea, and the high heavens. This describes heaven and the immeasurable multitude of stars, as all the journey of the golden-haired sun, and the laborious eclipses of the moon. This, with a geometrical staff, describes the ways of the stars. Wow. Wow. See, what's interesting about some of these books, and some of these grimoires, well, especially when you're dealing with alchemy, it tends to gravitate toward a lot of Greek philosophy. You start getting into all forms of deep, like ideas regarding Stoicism, Aristotelian views on reason, logic, and then you throw into the mix some symbolism provided to you by the Bible and all its many stories. And you can get some pretty complex, super multi-layered stuff. And then you throw in these early sciences of alchemy, prior to the advent of any kind of modern science. And, well, you get some paragraphs that, unless you're really familiar with specific literature of the time or that inspired the original writing, it can get a little bit confusing. And there was one or two phrases and mentions in there that I'm not very familiar with. So it kind of threw off any kind of thoughts I was having on the matter, because I kind of started thinking, oh, I don't know about that. I need to read about this. I need to read about that. So the reason I mention this is because if you're ever reading some ancient sort of occult manuscripts or texts of any kind, and you come across a situation like this in which you don't really understand what it is the author was intending to say because he's making references to things that you're unfamiliar with, that's the beauty of the internet, isn't it? You get yourself a little bit familiar with what it is he's talking about and go back to the paragraph. A lot of these texts aren't very long, very short, so rereading them is not a great cause. I mean, I'm about halfway done almost with this text. It's only about 50 something pages. So if you want to get whatever value there is in the words, and they can get a little bit, well, esoteric, right? Just do a little extra research on the side. Doesn't take a lot. And then you can get the better impression of what it is that they're trying to speak. And again, in combination with some of the wording, which tends to be pretty archaic in style. Regardless of how modern the translation is, sometimes it's just the sentence structure itself can be a little strange and unfamiliar compared to whatever nonfiction you are familiar with reading in general. So just some thoughts on that. I'm going to have to do the same for some of what I just read. I'm moving a little bit forward here. So chapter 10, what the philosophers and what sort of nature they would have, where the spirit is said to be the ethereal chariot of the soul. Chapter 11 teaches that solution is necessary, by which the generative spirit is brought out of the body. Chapter 12 disputes of hidden things in the art, and about threefold separation. And another chapter with a paragraph-long title. And chapter 14 has an even larger paragraph-long title. I find these just overly structured, just overly explain titles. I don't know the word for them. Redundancy, maybe? Maybe not so much. But these titles are just not efficient. And I find that humorous. Chapter 14 is called Disputes about the Second Part of the Praxis, where there is more secret dispute about the fire and colors, and these questions are resolved. Whether heaven ought to descend to the earth, or the earth ascend into the heavens, or whether both ought to remain beneath heaven, where the spirit is compared to an angel who seemed to descend with a human soul into a body. So what I find interesting is a lot of that can, be a part of the content of the chapter itself, but it's kind of stuck in the title. And I see that a lot with some of these. Something you don't really see in any kind of modern writings. So I'm just moving on ahead, see if there's any other interesting titles. Let's see here, chapter 16. Of the augmentation itself of the stone, both of the ancients, the modern philosophers, and it is concluded that there is but one day and one night. Again, 7 days for the 7 lords of the world. Let me read a little bit of this one. It now pleases me, son of wisdom, to bring that physical pinnacle into the happy work. Then move the oars, spread the sails abroad, give a swift and prosperous wind. The safe haven is to be looked for. After our stone is made white, we call it our begotten son. Though now a child that is perfect man, consisting of body and soul, yet it is not able to get another progeny, unless it be first bred up with the nourishment of its own nature, until it arrives at the age mature for generations. We have received from the ancient philosophers, who operated in nature only, that their living water was divided into 2 parts, who then they had with one part of the water attained to fixed whiteness. They rubified it with the other part of the water, which was reserved, or perhaps with fire alone. Others in the red stone, because it hath ascended to the highest degree, and cannot be increased by itself, have begun again those works which they accomplished, where did I get that from? Accomplished before, dissolving that redness with the other part of the water, which they had reserved. They again reduced it into the first essence, as I may say, and they worked almost in all things as from the beginning, but truly with a greater industry both of the fire and of the labors, and I believe this repetition to be the truer and the greater augmentation. Wherefore also the first philosophers used a longer time in finishing the stone, which their successors our posterity used to the end, in which a course of a year, so that they augmented the white stone, by which they could tinge into silver with the lunar sperm throughout the whole, or by adding to it other spirits, namely white ones drawn out from tin and led by sublimation. Moreover, they rubified the white stone with the solar sperm. What is solar sperm? I'm curious. I'm unfamiliar with the term. The solar sperm. Okay, I can't find any immediate results on what that means. So if anyone that's listening is curious, put in the comments for me what in the hell a solar sperm is. I can imagine, but I'd rather not. Or other reddish spirits out of the iron and copper. And this, you may judge, was done not amiss, since those inferior bodies have such much tincture in them. If so be you should take is the most perfect out of those bodies, and should add it to the more perfect body, what doubt is there that the whole would be made perfect? And such like inferior bodies are called spirits, when we say, dissolve the body, that is the stone already made, and join the spirits. They are also called children, when we say, children, play with the stone, and they make it greater in weight and virtue. Whence also we in other works know the urine of children, of 4-year-olds. Okay. To be the water of the 4 inferior bodies, which since it is called the aqua fortis of the philosophers, is said to dissolve gold, out of which things we do not deny, but that a certain stone is made. So the dissolving of gold via children's urine? And thus it helps in the production of the stone. The mineral stone we distinguish in the three ways. The stone of the philosopher is made out of gold alone, in nature alone, and that is the more sublime, which is by the philosopher reported to cure all sickness. The second is a simple stone, when the root only and the sulfur or gold or silver is in the end augmented by the spirit's inferior bodies, where their way sets down and the lesser turba are discussed, 1 to 3 or 2 to 7, wanting only golden or silver sulfur. Oh, here we go. This is what I wanted to get to because I mentioned it in the introduction or the about, but it seems to be the last chapter. Chapter 20 lays down the questions put by Ilardus, I like that, the Necromancer to the devil, concerning the stone of the philosophers. So the conversation that was mentioned earlier. A certain Necromancer, Ilardus, by name, in the province of Catalonia, put these questions to the devil. Whether the stone of the philosopher can be made to convert the imperfect metals into gold and silver, fire being the judge. All metals are essential in gold, with their earth in a manifold color, out of which its earth, with its own essence, the stone is made, which by its nature takes all uncleanliness away, and being projected to the imperfect metals, fixes them forever. What and what kind of essence is that? It is a soul, a middle earth, which permits one form to be converted into another. So this is the back and forth between, well, the devil, or some form of devil, and this necromancer. In what manner does the soul, the middle nature, act? Asks the necromancer. I almost want to say. The devil responds. Neither angels nor men in any wise inwardly behold, or comprehend it by the acutest understandings, because this is proper to God, who reserved this to his own majesty. Can man make the stone? Whatever God has created, having a property, it is possible for man to act upon it, but it is very hard to make the stone, yet it may be made. The soul, the middle nature, has it a body? The color of gold is the body of the soul, the middle nature. By what way can the color be separated from gold? The soul, the middle nature, with its heat and moisture does divide and conjoin both together. The color of gold, is it white or black, or of what sort? It is white, to man's sight, but in spirit it is blue. In what manner and out of what is color made? What is it? In what matter and out of what is color made? In what manner, sorry. Nature makes it out of pure earth and pure water. Is there a color in all metals? Not only in metals, but also in the elements, there is a hidden color. Ooh. Of what virtue or power is a stone? The stone can purify all imperfect metallic bodies from all leprosy, so that they shall be perpetual even to the last judgment. It cures human bodies of all sickness, until a natural death. That's why there's a lot of stories regarding alchemists that produced these stones or managed to, living for countless years longer than is normal, especially during those time periods in which people weren't exactly living to their 90s and such. Of what sort and what thing is the soul of a human body? It is the living fire of heavenly life, and hath itself the soul, the middle nature. By the soul, the middle nature, God is called the creator of all things which are in the world. Had Virgil the stone? Not only did he have it, but many philosophers had it, and have written in diverse ways about it, under obscure names and may operations. Why? Why would they write under obscure names? What is there to hide? That's what's so interesting about esoteric knowledge, is this idea that, the production of this Philosopher's Stone is something to be hidden and only used by those who are familiar with its importance and its symbol. Um, I've always found that interesting. Hidden knowledge. Why is it hidden? I always see that it is hidden, but it's rarely explained. Outside of that, it needs to be hidden. How and why is it called the stone? I tell you that the stone is its name, and there is no permission given me to let you know more. So, how and why is it called the stone? It's, signifying that it's not actually a physical stone, some kind of physical manifestation. It can be far less tangible, but yet it is referred to as the stone. But the devil states that he cannot explain why it's called this. Yes, he doesn't have the permission. It's above his clearance level. In what time can the stone be brought to an end? 12 months are necessary from the first day of the beginning. In 30 days an earth is generated out of lead, or the nature of the earth makes lead grow. In 100 days argent vivae grows in water. In 60 days completed there grew a vapor out of tin completed. In the other days of the year fire grows from gold. In the moment the year ending, the soul, the middle nature, descends from heaven and into this earth, and mortifies the superior and inferior powers, the image of the manifold victory, to consume the war in the heart of the belly of them, even to the perpetual judgment of fire. I will tell you no more. Alright, that's where the book itself ends. There was a couple of chapters of interest that I didn't actually go over. See, what's interesting is I can read these like I have been, and I'm going to continue doing so, but these are not works that I can just casually comment on sometimes. It depends. I try. But something of this magnitude and depth requires a little more forethought. And what I'm trying to do here is maybe promote you doing so, because I know I'm going to go back and look at this and dig a little bit deeper into what it is that I'm reading. But I want you to do the same. If you're interested, of course, is the Tarl Warwick edition. You can find it on Amazon. You can download it digitally on your Kindle. It's easy to get. It's $1.50, maybe $2. I don't remember. Any case, ancient knowledge available to you in the modern world for less than a double cheeseburger. Buy it. Read it. See what you can get out of it. You'd be surprised how relevant some of this information is. Yes, I get it. It's what is alchemy, right? How relevant is that to your everyday life? Are you going to go out there and try to create a philosopher's stone? If it is in fact a stone at all, according to what the devil states there. But that's not the point. The point is that there's historically these great challenges, these great tasks that man set forth for himself to achieve. Whether, it is to create the greatest society or to find the essence of the soul or anything else. These adventures that man has gone on or partaken in are important to understand why you challenge yourself in any type of way that you already do. The search for purpose, the search for worth of your action, of what you are as a sentient being. I think all those things are worth reading into, worth looking into, because the people who created these manuscripts, they dedicated their entire lives to this, and one doesn't do that lightly. Think about what you might have dedicated your life to, or what's most important to you. How many years it took you to come to that conclusion. Or better yet, if you haven't at all, why not? And why these people did. And how these people in their actions and in their search for purpose can help you do the same. Just a thought. Just another little ramble. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you will do again in the future.